was really thrilled to get to experience the opera Breaking the Waves by Missy Mazzoli and Royce Vavrek. I thought it was a really amazing piece of art, a really epic work of intense emotional scope and with a great juxtaposition of really brutal subject matter and beautiful music, made for like a really cathartic emotional experience. An interesting aspect of the opera, I thought, was Mazzoli's use of an all-male chorus. They played a dual role. Both they created a really dark color just in terms of all the low bass voices. I think that really gave a special flavor to the opera. All the male characters were also, played a role in the opera. They were, either the church elders of the main character's church, or they were sailors. So the opera is about this main character Bess, and she's kind of intruding on all these all-male worlds. So the chorus represented that. Breaking the Waves uses a chamber orchestra rather than a full orchestra. This lent the opera sort of a unique sound world. It allowed really solo lines to come out really clearly, like there are moments where only a piccolo is playing or one violin is playing really high, and then you have these really beautiful, fragile moments. So the combination of this full force, all-male chorus and this kind of fragile textured chamber orchestra gives a really special, unique quality. I thought the staging of the opera was really organic, like the music and the physical staging fed really well into each other. They obviously collaborated a lot in the process of creating the opera, and that it makes for a really dramatic result. Like the arc of the piece, the music and the staging at every moment is like they're like feeding into each other, building up a really intense and beautiful arc. An interesting technique that the staging made use of was that in certain key moments, the director had the characters on stage become static. So this really emphasized the high drama of the moment. The main character, Bess, is being pulled in all these opposing directions emotionally. She's being pulled into a direction following the love of her husband, and then she's also being pulled in opposing direction of her being devoted to her religious community, which is really strict. So having her sort of freeze and be singing while all the bustling activity behind her is suddenly frozen really illustrates this state of mind.
Well, I think that having this amazing story, I just think that the story of Breaking the Waves is incredible to work with, because each character is infinitely complex, and I, as the composer, have the choice to go as deep or as shallow as I want to into their character, and to explore different aspects of their character. And this is particularly attractive with female characters, who are usually, I think, in not just in opera but in a lot of media, just more shallow, or they serve a role, and you don't really go into their psychology, and they're not complicated. So doing that with these female characters in Breaking the Waves is really exciting.
So the staging design used the same set for all acts of the opera. So it was the same physical piece on stage. I thought that was really interesting, and then that it was a very simple set, so it was able to play multiple roles and all kinds of different objects, different settings, made use of the same set, and it worked really well. I think part of the reason it worked well is because the production also used a videographer, so there were really great projections going on as part of the staging.
It's interesting that I had this thought the other day that everyone always says, oh, the story of Breaking the Waves is so intense, like how could you work with that? What are you doing, or what's wrong with you? And I just want to say, I was thinking about Madama Butterfly, and if you took that and that story, and it was, I forget if it was originally a play or something else. It was not originally an opera. But so if you just took the story itself and filmed it, took out all the music and just filmed it with handheld cameras in a really realistic contemporary setting, It would be so brutal. That story is so brutal, and you could say that about most opera. But we think of that opera, and we don't think of that first. We think of the beautiful melodies and the music, which acts as a sort of buffer between us and these terrible events that are happening on stage. So inevitably, I think just because of the nature of the genre, opera has this like softening effect. Even when the music is brutal, it just provides a little more space for you to, deal with what's going on stage.
I feel that contemporary opera composers, especially the ones of the younger generation, of which I think I would count Missy Mazzoli as one of, I do think they're drawing a lot of inspiration from more recent works of opera, like 20th and 21st century pieces. These are pieces that are not necessarily driven by narrative, but so they have a kind of a wider emotion, a different emotional trajectory than, say, a traditional, Wagner or Mozart opera, which was very narratively driven. I think this is a really interesting development, and I like, just as a listener, it really speaks to me a bit more than, say, traditional opera does. So I'm really excited that this seems to be a recent development.
His name is